The station was formed in 1979. We were issued with a licence to broadcast fine music to Brisbane, fine music being defined as classical music and jazz at that stage. So we've been on air 35 years. It was started by a group of music lovers, about a dozen of us, and we felt that Brisbane deserved an FM classical music station. It was basically the new medium, the new kid on the block. We were becoming frustrated that the ABC's national classical FM service wasn't coming to Brisbane, and it kept on being delayed and delayed. So we got it in our head that we should apply for a licence, and we did. It took us 3 years to get the licence, endless meetings and very frustrating applications for licences, and we were unsuccessful a couple of times, but eventually after 3 years we were granted a licence, and the purpose of the station is to broadcast fine music, and that's it, pure and simple. Mm-hmm. We've got 350 volunteers last time we counted, so there's probably more. Not that they're breeding or anything, it's just that we keep attracting volunteers coming through the door every week that are interested in what we're doing. I think we're very fortunate in that we all have one thing that binds us together, and that's a love of and a passion for great music. The Gothic Symphony, for those people who aren't familiar with it, is the world's largest symphony. It's huge. It was actually in the Guinness Book of Records as the world's most difficult, complex and largest symphony ever composed. It was composed in the 1920s, but the first performance of it wasn't until 1961, simply because of the forces involved. It requires almost 200 musicians in the orchestra and at least 500 people in the choir. So it's a huge work. It had only been performed a mere handful of times before I saw it in 1980 in the Albert Hall in London. I got it into my head that we should have a go at doing it here in Brisbane. That was a bit tricky because at that stage we didn't have the Queensland Performing Arts Complex. We only had City Hall, which was too small anyway for it. So this quest began to perform this Gothic Symphony, and it's just under 2 hours long. It's a mammoth undertaking, and there are very good reasons why it's only been done a few times. It's an enormously complex and expensive exercise to mount it. So it took me from the time when I seriously started to pursue that vision of performing the Gothic Symphony in Brisbane to when we actually got it performed on the 22nd of December 2010. The date is burnt into my brain. That took 28 years. So yes, that was, I think, an extreme example of passion for the music. So it really did put Brisbane on the classical music map in terms of being able to pull off this extraordinary work, which has thwarted many very eminent conductors around the world for 40, 50 years that were trying to get it done, and we did it in Brisbane, so we're enormously proud of that. When I'm asked about what is the demographic for our station, what's our audience, I say it's anyone that's interested in classical music, and that can go from children through to teenagers, through to early adulthood, and right through to people discovering classical music when they're in their 80s and 90s. I had a phone call a couple of years ago from a fellow who was in his 90s, phoned up extraordinarily excited, had just found us on the dial, absolutely amazed by the music. He'd never had any exposure to classical music in his entire life, and he was flabbergasted by it, and he said every day is a revelation, and that man was in his early 90s. I'm pleased to say that in the end of our 35th year on air, there is as much enthusiasm in this radio station of all the volunteers and the staff as when we started day one. And we've only been able to achieve that through continually expanding and creating interesting things for us to engage with. And that's the secret that I hope is not really a secret, but I think that's the path forward for classical music broadcast.